What is urbanization? Urbanization is a process by which a country's population becomes concentrated in certain areas, referred to as cities. This is the Economics of Anything project about this move to urban areas by Unnat Ghura. Why is this topic even important? The way that our society decides to live influences the country's economy. The location and proximity of a country's people have the capability to make or break its economic well-being. First, let's talk a bit about the history of urbanization. This process wasn't as widely adopted until the Industrial Revolution. Before the revolution, places like Rome were still densely packed with population densities almost twice that of Calcutta or Hong Kong. There were permanent villages with bodies of water and infrastructure within walking distance. After the revolution, development in electricity and other technologies allowed cities to expand. Using new technology in transportation, cities were now larger as more space could be occupied without caring much about proximity. Of course, with the increased presence of cities and buildings, single-family homes became less prominent. As people moved to cities, cooperation and diversity increased too. Urbanization has been closely related to economic growth. This process has many benefits, with the most obvious being innovation and the creation of new jobs. The increased number of people in these locations allows for a huge pool of available people who are part of the labor force. The new jobs created through development tend to appear in urban areas, which incorporate this influx of people. The increased employment in fields like data science or computer science allow for further development and increased potential GDP in the long run. Also, increased employment in urban areas correlates with a higher standard of living, leading to a more economically developed country. Those with college degrees and other higher levels of education flock to cities. Generally, life in cities is seen as much better, with the standard of living higher than in rural places. Rural poverty drives the younger generation away. But how do they make their place in such large cities? Through education. The poverty in rural areas incentivizes education, since educated people look for opportunities in other places, namely urban areas. Urbanization may seem like a great idea, but it has its drawbacks, one of which is polarization. As mentioned before, those with college degrees and other high levels of education flock to cities, leaving others behind in rural communities. This, in turn, leads to the polarization of ideas. As we already know, people in rural areas tend to be more conservative, whereas those in urban areas are progressive politically. This divide between the two distinctly different groups is amplified by their distance. This is due to group polarization, the tendency for a group to adopt more like-minded ideologies and behave in a way that is more extreme than individual beliefs. Of course, it is clear that this divide of ideas will result in terrible long-term consequences. Another problem frequently associated with urbanization is wealth inequality. As mentioned earlier, people who have pursued higher education tend to move to larger cities with opportunities. This movement increases the quality of living for those in cities, while the rural, uneducated people are left behind. While college graduates get white-collar jobs, the rural population is stuck doing blue-collar work. The wealth inequality is evident when the cost of living is compared. Rural areas tend to be cheaper than with single-family homes. Urban areas are extremely costly, with penthouses reaching the millions. Economically speaking, the demand for housing is a lot higher, as the cities are densely populated, and the supply is low due to the smaller availability of space. This causes inflated prices. But surprisingly, people are willing to pay these high prices, so the cycle continues. Lastly, environmental concerns. Each urban area has green space and gray space. Green space is exactly what you might think. It consists of plants, trees, and other natural areas like gardens. Gray space, on the other hand, is the space taken up by buildings and other infrastructure. Due to the scarcity of space, a balance of the two is hard to achieve. As humans, we have a limited amount of space to use for living purposes. This scarcity is the reason why the price tag of apartments in cities is so high. Now, urbanization has its pros and cons, but there are proposed solutions to some of its cons. First of all, there's the obvious solution to tax proportionally based on income. This has been proposed multiple times, but it seems as though this solution is not widely accepted. Another proposition is education for all. This solution will allow all those who decide to pursue better lives to have the opportunity to do so. The future is inevitably urban. It's up to us to make sure that no one gets left behind in the pursuit of a growing economy.